like we've got a really good group here and people have stopped trickling in, so I can go ahead and get us started. James and Jen and a lot of people I think are at NECAPA today, so I'll be helping with running the call this morning. What we're going to be talking about today is just dusting off the CEDR's plan now that we've gotten the CEDR's grant. Before I get started with it, I don't know, Warren, would you be able to give us an update on the workforce group? Okay, then let's get started with that and then we'll jump right into the others.
Great, thank you, Jen. Can everybody hear me okay? Right, yes, okay. We met as a subgroup, and this subcommittee consists of Sean, Ed Miles, who works with me, myself, and Charlie French. And we had a meeting last week to review what the Seacoast CEDR Workforce Development Program, what our objectives are moving forward. And really nothing has changed since we did this. Now, you know, we've got to get the dust out of our brains, because this was really an initiative that was finalized last December, and we submitted it to BEA in January. Reviewing the program, we have a goal statement, we have project descriptions, we have 3 tactics, we have project timing. I'm not sure, Jen, did you send that out in preparation for this meeting? Or did James? I think James might have. So basically, the goal statement is to support and promote the attraction, education, and retention of individuals and families who form the backbone of our thriving communities and talented workforce. We have a number of different objectives in there. The first objective is to support the attraction, development, and retention of employees by providing education and guidance to Seacoast employers on the value of investing and retaining current employees through the development and promotion of resources to support employer efforts. We have 3 tactics in that. One is research, document, and share. The second tactic is employee attraction and retention toolkit. And the third tactic is employer education marketing. And tactic 2 and 3 involve hiring a consulting firm, which is in the budget. As you all know, just to backtrack, the CEDR budget is $50,000. All of that money has to be expended by June of 2023. So we've got 8.5 months to do that. And we had a timeline that was submitted with this project that Sean, James, and I and Ed reduced a little bit. We sort of reduced that timeline to where it's going to fit, and it's all very doable. So project timing is from now until the end of June, and we're going to measure success as well. We have a bunch of different areas where our success will be measured. But tactic 2 and 3 involves hiring a consulting firm, and because of the amount of this our budget, an RFP is not required. So we don't need a formal RFP, but we do need a description of services. Ed and I thought we might be able to get the description of services ready for today, but we just didn't have time to do that. So our job moving forward is to get a description of services to the subcommittee and then to this general committee, to CEDS, with a goal of our next meeting. And the funds are going to be administered by SRPC. So basically, we revisited what we did, we accepted what we did, and we talked about it. We discussed next steps.
Warren, With that being said, I'll go ahead and jump into the bigger picture CEDR's grants. Basically, what we want to do today is we just want to hear from the group, kind of like I said before, dust off this plan and see, we want to plan for the rest of the quarter. So we want to have a plan through the end of December of this year of how we want to move forward with each of those topics that we had included in the contract for the CEDR's grant. So as you know, SRPC, Regional Planning, Rockingham and Planning Commission, and REDC will be working together on the administration part of this over these calls going forward. As a group, we met last week just to sort of kick off the process and decide. We decided it would be best to just take a look at the scope of the grant and ensure that everything that we wrote in there when we submitted it still made sense and is still applicable. So today, I'll just do a brief overview and reminder of what we had originally talked about this project doing, and we can decide if this is all still stuff that we want to do, and just do a little bit of brainstorming on how we want to achieve each goal. For the next call, which would be scheduled for November the 1st, after getting everyone's thoughts on this call, we'll go over what we've heard on this call and sort of come up with some metrics and speakers that we as a group want to suggest for the rest of the quarter. And we also need to figure out the metrics that we want to present, because we do have to present DEA with metrics by December. It's not we're not 100% clear yet on what those metrics are. So I don't know if Michaela's on this call this morning. It looks like he isn't. We're just waiting for some guidance from Michaela on what those metrics are before we can really nail that down. But just keep that in the back of your mind. If you have any ideas of metrics, that would be great. So I sent a document in the chat for you all to take a look at. That's what we prioritized in the contract. So just as a reminder, we had talked about housing, we talked about workforce, which weren't already covered, and it sounds like the subcommittee, the workforce subcommittee, has pretty much gotten that topic fully covered. We talked about infrastructure, and we included quality of life as well. So what I want to know today is, to this group, do these topics all still make sense? Are there any that are more pressing than others? Do we want to revisit some, or do we want to add a topic on the list that we really want to work in? Because we do have a little bit of flexibility, it sounds like, with the contract, if we wanted to make any of these changes. So if you want to make any changes to this, then today would be the last call for changes. You know what you think? Tell you, just going one by one, starting with the housing. It looks like what we wrote in here is a lot of, or it's completely RHNA. This one, for example, to bring back on the RHNA this quarter, maybe only adoption and implementation, which will happen just because of the timeline that's due at the end of December. So that's definitely something that we can keep in, but probably not a lot that we can work on a couple of months. Development, like I said, it looks like the subcommittee has everything pretty much covered. I'd say maybe what we want to decide as a group is whether we want to have a call where the subcommittee can report back in early November or December about where they've gone from today, and also decide if this group is working on, as this group works on getting materials out to procure a consultant, do we want to task the subcommittee on deciding who that is, or should we assign them to bring back a recommendation for the group to sign off on?
Jen, which subcommittee are you referring to?
Development subcommittee.
I'm sorry.
Workforce. This one, ours.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I think what the discussion was is that the subcommittee that's working on workforce housing is going to, or sorry, not workforce, is going to be looking to hire a consultant. And as Warren told us, they're going to hopefully present us with the work outline at the next meeting. So then the question becomes, do we task that subcommittee with the selection of the consultant, or are we going to ask them to bring it back to this full group for consideration? And personally, I think we have a pretty talented, robust subcommittee, so I think that they would be good selecting it, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of live by too many cooks spoil the broth. And if you as a subcommittee are willing to take on this additional layer, I don't know how the subject matter could be in more trusted hands. So for me, I completely agree. Putting in a bunch of people who really don't know the details, I don't think serves the end goal well.
Thanks, guys. Now I'll just jump in and say we did revise our timeline, so we're looking to have a consultant by the end of the year, by the end of December. We're kind of starting now, and certainly working with James and the team in terms of that procurement process, which is Warren updated us. It doesn't have to be a full RFP, so we do expect to go out to multiple firms. I say multiple, at least 3. And see who's interested. It's really not a big job, so we may not get all that much interest, but I think a few of us have some ideas who we want to make sure we at least get this in front of, and then be able to move pretty quickly as it's kind of been sitting on the shelf for a while. So and nothing's really changed. It probably has gotten worse in terms of employers trying to attract and retain employers. So the sooner we go, the better.
Not directly to that point, but Darren Winham keeps texting me that he's trying to get in and waiting to be let in. We don't want to miss that opportunity.
No, we don't.
In the waiting room, but let me, oh, here it is. Okay.
So it seems to me, is there any further discussion around us being around the subcommittee being able to decide on who we choose to provide these services? Okay, so it seems to me that by the next meeting we will come back with a statement, a description of services. We're going to be 1 to 2 pages, not going to be very extensive at all. I think, if the greater group would like to provide feedback on that, that's fine. If you don't want to provide feedback on that, then we could also do that as a subcommittee. So that's my follow-up question. Do you want to be part of that description of services as a greater committee? We don't want to overstep our bounds. Basically, we want to play within the rules that you all want.
Warren, would there be enough time to maybe send the description of services to the committee, or have Strafford send it to the committee? And then just if there's anything that's standing out, like if it was sent to the committee a couple days before the meeting, if there's anything that stands out, if no one has any issues, then we're good to go. Would that be, or would that be not enough time?
I think if we set a deadline, our next meeting is 2 weeks from today, right?
Right.
If we set a deadline to get this out by everybody by a week from Friday, I think that's very reasonable. Don't you think, Sean?
Sure. Yes, I do. No, I do. It's my number 1 priority, Warren. Yeah, no, I think, again, we've had this, we've all agreed on it. We've talked about it for a while. So it's really just a matter of, as Natalie says, dusting it off, making sure we're hitting the key points today as opposed to a year ago, and and then have something that someone will respond to, within the dollars allowable and provide good quality at those dollars.
And just to be clear, we're looking for, Sean had mentioned that we're looking to get it out to 3 potential providers. I think ideally we would like 3 responses. So
Sure.
if anybody has marketing firms who might be interested, certainly send that our way. Because the more we can send, the more companies we can send this out to, the bigger our potential pool is, because we all know how busy everybody is, and our response rate, we're not sure what the response rate will be.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Warren.
Who sent this out to open the door? Chris Pappas?
Mhm. Yep.
He worked with us in one
She
of our
helped us out.
projects. Oh, great. Okay.
She helped us out a lot in putting this together. She consulted with us. We're certainly going to send it out to her, yes. But, yeah.
Sounds like workforce we've got, again, nailed down. So I'll take a step back and ask everyone, do these 4 topics that we had included in the contract, do they still make sense to everyone? Take out anything we want to work in? Oh, go ahead. I don't know who's on the call, on the phone.
Sure. This is Mikhail Patel, and I was not able to join by laptop this time, so I'm dialed in and I'm on mute.
Has any thoughts on changing the topic? So I'm gonna assume that we're good with keeping those 4 topics that we had discussed. Do we want to prioritize any of these topics that the group thinks that we can tackle in this upcoming quarter?
Natalie, I apologize to you and everyone. I don't have them right in front of me. Can anyone just run through the 4 real quick from my head?
I dropped it in the chat. Did you guys get it?
Oh, okay, let's see.
What the 4 topics that we had included in the contract were housing, workforce development, infrastructure, and quality of life. Pretty RHNA heavy. Infrastructure, we did a combination of transportation, electrical vehicles, and intermunicipal infrastructure. Quality of life, we noted under that marketing the Seacoast was, I think, the main one, and then there was downtown vibrancy, and greenways.
I think we have to keep in mind that we have $50,000 and no more.
Yeah.
So, how much of this gets diluted between 4 relatively large projects, right? We have, infrastructure. I mean, I'm not sure what we can accomplish on a limited budget. So I'll just pose that question.
I think those 4 subjects, if that's sort of an indirect way of getting back to that answer, I think that they're still appropriate. And I'm with you, even as I sort through the order of them. For us in Somersworth, I would say the workforce development, housing obviously, and workforce development are still premier subjects. And I think right now workforce development is kind of taking over a lot of the other priorities, or it's consuming us. The employee shortage, the employee skill set, the whole culture of quiet quitting with no commitment and no passion and no drive is all affecting our Somersworth businesses. I'm told, and I believe that. So I'm on board, and I think that those priorities are still good. And I think how they shake out in terms of priority order makes sense to me too. For right
that they're
now.
listed in the contract.
Yeah, yeah, for me. It's funny, the quality of life actually kind of abstractly umbrellas all of the others, but the biggest voice right now for me at my desk is the whole workforce development issue. So I think it's all good.
Tori Jennison with Strafford County. I'm also hopeful that we can connect with the other groups and spaces where some of this work is already happening to make sure that there isn't a parallel effort going on. You know, I think of the Alliance for Community Transportation is doing some work around multimodal transportation. There are quite a few workforce development initiatives going on. A lot of them are in healthcare. But I think that would be an important next step, is to make sure that we capture as many other spaces where these conversations are happening as possible, so that we can kind of leverage that effort and not replicate it.
$50,000 budget and the desire to cover all of these topics. I think that would be probably the only way that we can tackle this. I mean, we're open to ideas if there are specific organizations or projects that relate to any of these topics. We definitely want to tie those in. So let us know and we can work together so that we can leverage our resources. All of these topics sound good to everyone. We need to figure out ideas of what you might actually be interested in doing related to these topics, because the way it's written right now is pretty general. So if you just think of it as, what deliverables do you think would provide value to your communities that are related to these topics, and what can we as a group do to try to tackle these issues?
Just to start the conversation up, I'll say from what I'm hearing at my desk right now, and it could be just yesterday or today or this week, so it's a top of mind for me. And I just am continue to be floored by it, but the whole psychology about being an employee and the value system of being an employee and what that means to employers, somehow, some way, in my head, has to be addressed. There are just too many businesses, especially our large manufacturers, that are having enormous issues with a million things. Applying for a job, accepting the job, never showing up for work, accepting the job, going to work for work, walking out, not talking to anyone and never walking back in, having absolutely no social skills, no social encounter, no personal or interpersonal responsibility for development of your position. And whatever that subject is, and broadly to me, it's workforce development, has taken a huge shift and somewhat COVID driven, but whether you want to call it quiet quitters, or whether you want to call it passive aggressive, or whether you just want to call it not caring and having no sense of social or personal responsibility, I don't know what it is. All I know for our businesses, it's a problem.
Yeah. So Robin, let me pull out my soapbox. You ready?
Okay.
We are not going to change individuals' behaviors.
Yeah.
Okay? The employers have the power to change individual behavior. So because they're all feeling it. I think this is where we were a year ago, which was, how do we help employers understand that they need to behave differently to affect different behavior.
And present differently.
Absolutely.
And I completely with you, Sean, truthfully, I really am. However we get there, the help is needed.
Yeah, no, and I think as we talked about, and I will get off my soapbox, but there are employers that have figured this out.
Yeah,
So, collecting that information and collecting those
it's cultural shifts.
best practices and sharing them and putting together tools, a toolbox for those employers that haven't figured it out or have just been really hit hard, is I think the goal here, understanding that even if we are wildly successful, all the jobs aren't going to get filled.
Yep.
So I watched a webinar that talked about these trends of people exiting the workforce have been going on for 20 years, not 2, right? And a lot of them are not coming back. So
Right.
What are employers going to do differently?
To
Right.
attract them,
That's, I think, where we come in.
to
And
attract them.
understanding that the labor line on a profit and loss statement is not the same as cost of goods sold. You're dealing with people being engaged in the company or not. The successful companies have engagement in their employee base, and the employees understand they enjoy coming to work because there's a camaraderie amongst employees and a camaraderie between employees and management.
Yeah.
And that's the skill set that I believe we need to impart upon business owners. That it's not like it was, 2, 3, 4 years ago, that employees want a voice, they want to be part of a successful company. And not only do they want to be remunerated for that, but they want to feel like they're part of the decision-making processes. So there's a lot to it.
I completely agree.
Business New Hampshire, in their latest issue, I believe, listed the best companies in New Hampshire to work for. So if you're talking about doing any kind of little research, I think you could look at that list and why are they the best companies? What are they doing right? Because I think you're right in terms of the people walking out, they just never felt a part of it. So how do you make people feel a part of it? And that's been something that employers have been trying to do for a long time. And, some even said, boy, if your homes were as responsive as your employers were, you might have easier times at home too, in terms of listening to people and what do people want and how do you treat them and all the rest.
So that's good. Obviously, we can't tackle that ourselves too much. We can agree though that Maggie and John Randolph are great employers, right? They with the daycare and with the build the housing and what have you. They were telling me a story last week, and they care very much about the people that are at Harmony Homes. They know them all personally. The staff knows them personally. They were saying that their chef walked out for no reason, went for a smoke break before lunch, just left, no call, no nothing. There was no food ready. They were scrambling. It was awful. And so the part of the issue is you can be a great employer and you can do everything you would think you would want if you worked there. But the market is what the market is. There's so many job opportunities out there. The employees have all the power right now.
Yeah.
And it's just a real challenge. So I don't know what we can do with this money. Don't mean to be devil's advocate, but it's a real problem. If Maggie and John can't keep an employee, who
Yeah.
can?
That's
You know?
my point. Some of that's still going to happen, Darren, but how can we, provide employers who are willing to change, the ability to change and maybe have better success or more success than they're having. Yeah.
Maybe
think
take
Meg-
Joe's suggestion. I guess let's see who's doing it right.
But that's that's still good. So the Randolphs are great employers. There's no question about it. But you're not gonna have a perfect track record. Things are gonna go off the rails, even if you follow best practices throughout your business. So what we're looking to do is up their game a little bit so that it's a little less challenging moving forward for those who want to participate in upping their game.
And what does that look like? Like what are 3 things an employer can do to give their employees a voice? And what, out of curiosity, what do we think they can do?
So this is Tori with Strafford County again, and I've had this conversation with the Randolphs and I would push back on the idea that it's for no reason. Most folks don't do this for no reason. It just means we don't know the reason or the reason isn't immediately visible. one of the conversations we had with them was about with the folks that we're hiring 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have considered hiring them because we wouldn't have considered them a good fit or a good risk or a good investment. So those are both true things, that there's a different need now. So they're looking into spaces where they haven't looked before. And I'm not sure that all employers are equipped to manage and supervise and direct folks with life experiences that are so different. And I don't want to get too squishy, but the concept of trauma-informed supervision, trauma-informed management may be new to some folks. So when you ask about what are some things people can do, it's recognized that there are going to be folks with different life experiences. Many of them have different experiences with trauma. And think about what you need to do differently as an employer, from hiring to onboarding to management.
Yeah.
So it's things like, maybe you don't do a group interview with 4 people. Maybe you do an interview with 1 person, maybe 2 people. These are very gross generalizations, but I don't think it's never no reason. It's just sometimes a reason we don't understand or accept.
And that's great points, Tori. Thank you so much. Those are great points. But I also think we don't know. So let's say we have potential employees coming right out of high school. We don't know if those 3 years of high school have that affected their social standing, not standing, but they've had limited interactions in their last 2 to 3 years of high school, limited social interactions. So coming out of high school, test scores are down, the ACT scores are down to 20-year lows right now because the past 2.5 years, schools have been really challenged in providing a good education because of the pandemic. And I would argue that social skills have really been challenged as well. So understanding that when you begin to hire, I think is part of the key, and coming up with solutions to mitigate that social lack of confidence.
Yeah,
I think is part of what we'll be looking at.
So I want to answer Darren's question so I don't look like a Dodger. No. So what are 3 things, right? A couple of things. One is being flexible with schedules. I mean, I think employers they probably already do that, but I mean, almost to the point of customization, like, you're a good fit for our company. We need someone with your talents. What do you need on your side? So it's a win-win, right? Another one is communicating and really more specifically, asking questions, and it's asking them often. It's not sitting down once a year saying you're above expectations or you're below, right? It's regular check-ins, like, hey, we feel like you're doing good for our company. How are we doing for you? And setting that expectation, not kowtowing to an employee, but engaging them, to use the word that Warren used. This is a big one. This defining a visible career path, right? People have the leverage now. So it's not about a job, and they're not working to survive. They're working because they want to work. So once again, can you show them what does it look like in a year or 2 or 5 or 10 or whatever they want that horizon to be? I mean, if they're just coming to make the most money from you so they can go move to an island, okay, well, you're going to figure that out pretty quick. But a lot of people want to know the pathway, whether they plan to stay with you for 20 years or not. And the last thing, near and dear to my heart is training and investment, investing in people from day one, whether it's communication skills, social skills, teamwork, whatever the case may be. What I've seen in my recent experiences, the companies that invest in employees often keep them. Not always. Sometimes they invest in them and they lose them, but that's part of the risk. So that's 3 or 4 I wanted to get on the table.
I thought that's excellent, man. Great answer, Sean. I think maybe we ought to consider bringing some HR people on here from some companies in our communities and having this discussion and finding out, small companies, big companies. A great example is Las Olas, small company, doesn't lose employees ever. He treats them fantastically, he pays them, he treats them like they have a lot of worth. And I don't think he's lost an employee. Certainly he didn't lose one through the pandemic.
Wow.
But if we had some professionals on and asked them what are they doing and what's working, maybe we could figure out a way that we set up a program with this money to help other employers.
Yeah, and just to add, and it's neither here nor there, but just a point of interest. In my opinion, in my perspective, being in this position for the last 5 years, it is not pandemic driven. 5 years ago, I was created and was giving classes at the Career Technical Center on basic social skills, like shaking a hand and pulling out a chair and standing up when authority walks in the room, because there was already such an issue in Somersworth, and the Career Technical Center, coupled in partnership with this office, was working to address that then. So I think that the pandemic exacerbated it and gave more empowerment of it. But I think that this reached this point over the course of several years, not just the pandemic.
So I agree with Darren around adding an HR person to give us a hand with this. They're professionals in this. A lot of us on the committee are more generalists with, and understanding and interest in the topic at hand. I will add one more thing to what to Sean's list, and that is treat your employees and your potential employees as whole people. They have interests outside of work, engage in those interests. I have a former client who one of the questions and one of the reasons that they hired people is because they had outside interest, whether that's musical or whether that's sports. When I used to own the bakery, we hired athletes all the time because they had work ethics through their athleticism and their participation in sport.
And they understood team.
Right. So I will add hiring a whole person and being interested in that.
Great point.
Adding a couple of things, that I think that we can really take away as metrics. And one of them is, adding an HR person to these conversations. I just want to steer the conversation a little bit more in the direction of, thinking about some specific deliverables for each of these topics. And since we have Mikhail on the call, I just want to pick on you, Mikhail. I think if we could know what sort of specific deliverables and metrics CEA is expecting from us in December, I think that could really help shape this conversation and on what we can do for each of these topics. It's like, I don't know if it's the qualitative, quantitative data. Is it something like, is it letters of support? Is it one-pagers? Is it advocacy?
I'm not sure if Mikhail can see the list, Natalie, so maybe we can ask him to think about that and bring it back for the next meeting. If he doesn't have it today.
Yeah, I don't think he's on, is he?
He had dialed in at one point by phone, but I don't know. I think because he couldn't get on Zoom, he might not be able to see the document.
Well, who's that 9398 number? Is that him?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think so. While we're waiting, by the way, I put in the chat that story of the best companies to work for in New Hampshire. So if we're looking for an HR person, maybe we look at that list and talk to one or two of those companies. Or
yeah, I think we should bring more than just one person. I think bring a couple HR people on.
Yeah, they list a Hall of Fame, so the multiple winners even. So maybe even go down to that list.
Thanks,
I think what they do is they separate large businesses from small businesses, and I'd be more interested in small businesses and larger businesses. So
yeah. Yeah.
Or even if it's not,
sorry about that. I think what we're going to do, because some metrics, will be qualitative, some will be quantitative. I'm not aware of any preference that we have right now. So long as the metrics show that work was done and that there was a successful outcome. I think there's enough collective expertise here that we can put together a good metrics package. But I would not be able to tell you, per project which metric should use right now. But in a subsequent meeting, I think we can hammer that out.
Do you think that by next meeting that we could iron out?
Right. Yeah. So, prior to next meeting, I would suggest setting up a call with as many people that are interested in having the metrics talk. If you want to help shape those metrics, then you should be on those calls. If you just want to be informed of, what those metrics are, then you could probably wait until next, meeting.
About the infrastructure, I'm sorry, not infrastructure, for the quality of life. I know that back earlier this year, we had someone present about greenways. I believe it was March or April. We couldn't recall last week as a group, we couldn't recall any specific metrics that came out of that, but just to pick your brain, would this be something that we want to go back to and, ask if they need support with this project, or if there's any opportunities for communities to link into it, or just ask how we can connect other communities, because I believe that was fully in our PC's region. So is this something that we would want to revisit as a metric as a deliverable for quality of life? Or do we just want to say that we've covered greenways and not address it?
Who's that question to? Is that to me or to the group?
Group. I'm just kind of trying to pick the group's brain on some deliverables that we can come up with.
I think my knee jerk is we have to be very cautious and over anticipating what this volunteer group is capable of doing. And so in my head, I think keeping it narrow and deep versus wide and shallow makes a lot of sense. And I think we're in good hands with subcommittee to determine some of those aspects, and maybe some more on the lower edge of the list. There are things in my head that are a little more immediate, like housing and the workforce development for me in Somersworth is just a huge issue. So for me, there are priorities that have more immediate implications. Not to say that others of the other two of the four issues aren't important, but they're very aspirational in my head. And truthfully, the two more tangible projects do affect the more aspirational goals too.
No, that's
I think-
totally valuable. That's
Yeah.
what I wanted to do, is sort of prioritize these topics and
Yeah, good job. Not to slough off a responsibility, but in my head, give this to the subcommittee and with these topics and give them more work to do because they don't have enough. Let them come back with their recommendations.
And the subcommittee is specific to the workforce development topic.
True.
So again, I think when it comes to workforce development, we've got the metrics and deliverables all set with the subcommittee because they really have done a great job in covering everything. It's just the other topics that we really need to come up with something more specific, or if we think it's too much for us to tackle. I mean, if we want to drop any of these, right now would be the time. So if we said we want it to focus on housing and workforce development, that's totally fair.
In my head, I would say with only $50,000 in such a short timeline, again, only one person's opinion, and I respect everyone disagreeing with this, but focus on housing and workforce development. I think quality of life more broadly is impacted by that, but I think we have to be reasonable what we can do in terms of volunteer time and talent. What do you guys think, subcommittee crew?
I think we have our hands full, so I think
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, I think that, again, I'm, as I said before, I don't want to spread us too thin.
Yeah,
And I think if we take on all four of these topics,
yeah,
with all due respect to infrastructure and quality of life, infrastructure is a major topic. I'm not sure how much we'll address, and quality of life is a very squishy topic, and we could do a minimal amount around quality of life because we have a lot to sell in the Seacoast. So, however, I think we should devote our energies to the two top topics.
I agree, and I still would say that I think that quality of life is affected by those two top topics. Of course, infrastructure too, but I'm with you, Warren. That is a sole subject matter, and it should stay on our list, in my opinion. But when it can be singular, addressed as the single, if there's a volunteer body like this, when it can be addressed as a singular issue, it's just too big and too wide and too deep. No pun intended, given that it's infrastructure. But I think housing and workforce development do affect the quality of life.
Yep.
Of course, the people in Rye who can't turn on their spigots and use their water might disagree, thinking that other issues might matter more. But for what's reasonable for us as a volunteer crew, I think those two subjects integrated,
yep,
kind of the nest of quality of life.
I look at infrastructure as, like the cost of energy being a subtopic of interest.
That's a good
And trying to tackle something like that in a limited budget with other topics that are important, I just think it's too much.
I agree.
it looks like prioritizing housing and workforce development for the group are important. Does anyone on this call feel any differently?
I agree. I think the idea of having some HR people on here and creating some sort of tool that companies could use, I think that would be a deliverable that'd be very valuable.
I love it.
I don't know how much we can do with housing. We've done a lot with housing. I know certainly the group in my community has, and we've had a lot of outreach. We've reached out, to the region. We've had forums. We've had walks. We've done a lot of good stuff. I'm not sure, certainly this group could do that as well. I'm not sure what we would do with it, but creating a deliverable, I think we really need to think in terms of end game.
So I mean, are you suggesting, are you all suggesting that we add an HR person to our subcommittee?
What I was suggesting is if we were talking about trying to help employers learn how to retain their employees through the ways that Sean had outlined, I would think that having some HR people from some companies that are successful, small ones like Los Olas, on this panel to have this discussion, 3 or 4 of them. Ben made a great idea about the was it NHRA? Yeah. Yes. So those folks as well. I would think that if we had a conversation about that, we can start to form an idea of a product or something. We can create a program or whatever it is that we can, get the results BEA is expecting.
Yeah, just a couple of things we
Yeah.
talked about as a subcommittee were either short videos from these
Fantastic
employers.
idea.
Go ahead, Mikhail.
I was just gonna chime in and say, I think that would be a great idea. Since I'm on the road, and I hear employers make these comments all the time. And, first I thought it was, 1 or 2 companies, but that's not the case. It's with all the companies,
Right.
regardless of industry now. And so I think something like that, very, very high value.
Yeah, and to Darren's point, I know we talked about as a group back before and maybe recently about having some of these best practices, whether they are small business owners or HR folks who are consult with a lot of small businesses. We talked about attempting to make short videos or even having webinars. So to your point, Darren, how do we get this message out? We're going to invite employers, we're going to show them a toolkit, and some are going to take us up on it and some are not. And some are going to be, decide that as much as they don't have time, that they want to learn a new way to support their business or to grow their business. And I think that's the goal on a limited budget. There's a lot of tools out there. Some small businesses don't even have time to go on the internet and follow the link and get the tool. So I think that's where a lot of the conversation was. I'm kind of hearkening back to last year about pulling this information together, finding other channels, whether it's YouTube or others, to do the outreach to make this information available to employers who are just, kind of struggling to keep up with their business and having the good problem of growth, but having the bad problem of not being able to leverage that.
Well, a tool like this, we can use it better than most because we have those bigs lists. We can send it directly to the recipient of the company, so we can get it out to every company in our community that's on the business good standing list has an email.
Right. Yep. I think the timing is good. As much as we were delayed, it's good.
So I'm looking at the document that was approved, the contract for the CEDR, and Natalie, please correct me if I'm reading this wrong, and subcommittee. The subcommittee, as I understand it, tactic 2 and tactic 3 are what the consultant is being hired for, hopefully. But tactic 1 is kind of what we've just been discussing. And so if the subcommittee is going to be busy with tactic 2 and tactic 3, do we want some sort of separate subcommittee to address tactic 1, or do we want to do it as a whole group? I mean, we're talking about, inviting the HR to the whole group. Then do we want, after maybe the HR comes to the whole group, a separate subcommittee to maybe put that list together to present, or, just some ideas there. So we're not putting everything on the existing subcommittee.
Mhm.
I think that's a good point, Jen. But all that to say, there's just, I don't think we've kind of figured out all the inner workings of it. I'm concerned there's a lot of information out there. A lot of organizations put information out there. How are we going to make that, I'll say, better or easier to use or more accessible to more employers? I'm thinking about the SBDC. They do a great job of informing and educating and outreach and follow-up and free consulting and free coaching. But everyone's not an SBDC client, right? So how do we leverage all that great experience? Those are the things we've been talking about. But
Three more minutes left of the call, so I just wanted to touch on something before everyone leaves. Another thing that we were discussing was to see if anyone has any ideas of any speakers that could join the group for the remainder of the year. Again, I've added, I'm not sure what this will look like for the HR specialist. I don't know if it's going to be a subcommittee specific thing or if they're going to be speakers or if it's going to be a panel here. So we'll have to think a little bit more about that and see what we can do and who we can gather. But are there any others that you guys can think of? I know that James had asked a couple of calls and he didn't hear back from anyone on any speakers. So if you do have any ideas, let us know. There's a couple of people that I understand, Jen, you were talking about with the group last week. One was Jen Legere. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, but she's the person for the Harmony Homes Child Care, from the Harmony Homes Child Care Center. So maybe having her on the call, but not to talk about child care issues, but something more specific. So something more specific to franchising and how that model works and how employers could take that model and replicate it if they wanted to. And then the other one, if I remember correctly, is Kim McCormick, Jen?
Kit McCormick, who works at RADC and runs the new Kiva program, which is statewide, and it's crowdsource funding small microloans. And so this is something that's used to reach underserved population, and it's something that can be sent out to, or taken back and pushed out to municipalities and to people who want to do startups, things like that. It's a model that's been around. I just am blown away by the concept, and so that might be something that not a lot of people know about, and it is something that's statewide that is available to everybody out there.
That's a great suggestion. And I have a suggestion. I can send an email with a little more detail, but I just learned, and I'm really surprised about it, the Department of Education has an amazing apprenticeship program. And on the Seacoast, the Automobile Dealer Association, driven by labor shortages, actually is in one of the first major partners with this new apprenticeship program. And so what happens real quickly in a nutshell is that there is a host entity that brings these students in from high school and college for very specific curriculum, and they obtain specific credentials. But the idea, the underlying idea is that this can help address the labor shortage and funnel people into specific career choices through this apprenticeship program. It partners with Great Bay Community College and UNH, and just kind of food for thought. And I'll send you the name of my liaison at the Department of Education. It's really, really interesting.
I think we've got a few ideas here. I appreciate it. Well, seeing that it is 10 a.m., I will let everyone go, but thank you so much for a great conversation, and we'll see you November 1st.